and pop it up to YouTube. So good morning, evening, Wednesday, April 15th, FoodOn Curation meeting. And going to continue on with the MIFC term curation. I'm going to start by talking about how I've done some reorganization over on the FoodOn robot side. So get feedback on that and plug Anusha in because this has all happened in the last week. So let's see, share. Okay, so FoodOn has these plant table and animal table and general FoodOn curation robot tables. And so, of course, plants, plant template, animal template plus seafood. Plants also had wine and they also had pasta. And but those things were not they're not growing, but more importantly, even if they were to grow by some curator's hand, the format is so similar and so generic to other entries. So what I've done is actually merge them into one template. And so this FoodOn Robot Tables template now has four tabs that we can focus on for all the new terms that fit. And so the tabs are for process model, which has always been there, called process. But there's now one called food material, and it's taking in all the food materials that are that have a generic home, uh, label, definition, and a subclass of parenthood, and just a few other fields. Food product, same thing. It's post-harvest usually, and you're starting to process the food. So that's where I've started to bring in tabs that used to be on the FoodOn robot table or some of the other tables. So there is at the end of this a little robot tabs history, and I've talked about where I'm renaming and merging tabs. But suffice to say, for food product, it now has the wines um, down here in various places, and it now has the pastas down at the bottom. And so we can add more pastas and wine and so on, foods that have some kind of process quality to them. Mm. Now, dried is a little bit of a debatable thing. I'll get back to that. But the idea here, though, is that in addition to harmonizing these tables, I also took a big move, to do what we've been talking about doing for a year, which is to move the synonymy and the cross-referencing out to another table. And that means that if we build FoodOn, we can build one version that just has the material, processes, products, but none of these cross references. The cross references we can actually manage separately. And this is a little bit of a staging exercise because the final SSOM table is this template one, and it has a different set of columns. But this SSOM synonyms table so far is just taken from the um, from the from the other tables as is in terms of the columns. So I'm not going to dwell on that at all now. Um, so that's just a rough orientation about some of the moves I made in the last week. And then focusing on the process model, there's something I want to do to this table. And that is that, okay, I've color coded it a bit so that any of these Processes that are should have terms to them eventually are highlighted in blue. But now I want to associate each process with the material entity that it outputs. The FoodOn has a class for that, and the quality of that food as so the vocabulary, so we don't go crazy shuttling around different tables to find whether a process is backed up by a quality term. So that
Can
also
I put just ask a question because I see that you have put process food cutting process in red, and I don't know why, because you
Mhm.
don't put process at each places. For example, food milling is it's not in food milling process. So why do you use
Exactly.
process just here?
So this is I'm adding a few comments about what I'd like to
Hmm.
remove from the name. Um,
Okay.
and so I wanted to get your feedback. There's a little bit of tension here. So I'll mention it in a moment. Um, hmm. Actually, I'll mention it now. So, yeah, I'd like to have just the minimal phrase that is clear about what it does. So I think we can drop the word process out of food cutting. I was trying to be consistent and make every process have the word process at the end, but then I realized that's actually overkill. So but I have been putting the word food in here, and um, this brings up one issue, which is that, say, Obo Foundry doesn't have a material processing branch that just has a general cutting, whether it's leather or food or what have you. Um, I'm adding the word food to some of these processes where I could see that they fit underneath the general material processing branch, but that there are aspects to the operation that are just a little bit more specific to food and therefore justifying that. I've been sort of waffling about that, so I guess I'm thinking we should just like take it case by case. Um, so, for example, I didn't say, right? I didn't say that. Whereas you can have sliced as a characteristic for many things. So I was thinking not to be specific about sliced pertaining just to food in the hierarchy. Um, and yet here it is, a food physical quality in the hierarchy. So there's a bit of pain here in terms of not already having a material, generic hierarchy to bounce things off of. Um, but I am also aware that when these terms come up in a search engine like OLS, people are going to look at them and decide whether they pertain to food or not. And sometimes they may not go to the definition. We'll back everything up here with a definition that should make clear that it pertains to food. Okay, so far, what do you guys think? Is this process model
And
table all
just
right?
an aside, because you mentioned food cutting, but food sliced, and I guess that you can have different kind of cutting and not just slice.
Yes, there are other kinds coming down here.
Diced, okay.
Cutting is a
But
very general term, and it can include dicing. So dicing would be a subclass of food cutting. Braiding is kind of a cutting. You could replicate the same thing with a very small knife. So there's discussion to be had about whether whether the parent class should be this food component separation, for example, right away or not. Um, and this is a little bit of a side, we're going off to a side in terms of MIFC discussion, but we'll return to that.
and minced is a synonym of ground.
At the moment, it is, but it shouldn't be.
I think mincing is a different process, like comes from mincing, and the grinding is a different process. I don't think both
Right,
of them.
right. I
Yeah.
agree. So let's fix that right now. Um, so here's an example of a term, food component separation process. It's in the robot process template. It's got the word process on the end. I'd actually like to drop the word process off of it. Um, so food mincing, where's the synonym? Is there a synonymy right now that says it's ground? Uh, Was that the comment about mincing?
I was asking.
Oh, you were asking. Um, okay. I have not, I have made ground separate. Food grinding. I don't know even know if we have food grinding. We need it. Okay, we do.
Yes.
So, um,
Yeah, Damien, don't worry. This is relevant to the di discussion of MIFC related terms because we can always add enumeration for processing if
mhm.
yeah. So this is relevant and this is really useful for FoodOn, I think. So keep going.
Okay. All right. So then let's drop the word process off.
But grinding is not just only for meat, it's also for wheat or
Right.
grains.
So grinding. What are we saying about grinding here?
Because it's the definition you mentioned, such as meat, but
Such as
I
meat,
think it's no
but that's
use.
not exclusive.
Well, not exclusive, yes.
So how about we do grinding food material? Does
Yeah,
that
it
help?
shouldn't such as shouldn't be in a OPO style definition.
Okay.
Yes, it's an enumeration or example.
Like maybe put that in a comment or I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So now in terms of synonymy, or no, I think examples are still here. Right. Um, okay. Right. So this is the triumvirate that I think many processes have, but not all. Process, material, and adjective. Now here I put in food uh, adjective.
I think it's no use.
I should suggest I skip it. Yeah, what do people think?
Well, what would be the function and like where how would this be? I think
Well,
one ground term is enough. Like what? Like
yeah,
unless it's like a condition ground or something like quality, like has been ground or something like that.
it's a
Has
quality,
quality some ground?
and it's this particular thing is meant to distinguish from ground as in soil
Ah, yes.
in search engines. But I don't know if there's another way to do this. Um, could just be adjective. I'll put this in red. And if people want to figure out what an opinion, just add it to this as a comment. Okay,
Even
food cutting, I think we can take out process.
But just a question, is it is in the hierarchy of characteristics? Can we, it is not ambiguous, but just if you put just the term, it's outside of the
That's right.
hierarchy or outside of the definition, you can't mix things, but otherwise not. But
Yeah.
it's
The
it's tricky to have
terms
adjective.
term sensu in ontology is meant to kind
Mm,
of tease out a little more information. So maybe
okay.
sensu adjective is better. Uh, okay, so one thing we could do here is run through quickly the. Okay, you've got a shareable repo. Great, Guy.
Yeah, it's officially they went to a conference this week and we're officially talking about it. So it is now official that there is a repo that is USDA that is public. We haven't published the paper about it yet, but it is there and people can look at it. So
Okay.
take that for what it's worth.
Congrats.
Great. And that reminds me, I will create the new characteristic paper, MIFC characteristic paper this week in order that we can all start pouring our content into it. And I'll lift from the current paper as mentioned what
Yeah,
seems
and
to be the core piece.
we'll see if like we label it that way because
Yeah.
it's like I could probably talk about it in terms of like supporting the existing project if you wanted. I don't know. We'll have to see what the phrasing will be
Yeah.
for USDA, but it's possible that that could be good phrasing. I'll talk to Kyle about it and let you know.
Okay.
Hey, Kai, do you have a link?
Yeah, I dropped it in the chat. Can you see it or I can post it
Oh,
again?
I've been having weird problems with like messaging. I don't know. I don't see it, but yeah, thank you.
Okay, I just posted it again. Do you see it now?
I do. Maybe it was because I joined a few
Yeah,
minutes
maybe you
after
joined
the hour.
after.
Awesome. That's so exciting.
Yeah,
Congrats.
it's a long time in the works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just take it from the top in terms of I reorganized a few MIFC characteristics here to the top, raw, fresh, and dried, because they're so basic. So then coming in, the process to get the FoodOn process table up to date is to check to see if a characteristic is in here.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like these resources should pretty much mirror each other, right?
Right.
Like MIFC is not trying to, be FoodOn. It's just trying to import terms that would be in FoodOn.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to provide the granularity to support that. So dried is a physical quality from Pato. So we would, whoops. So we would add physical quality, and literally this process model table will be the home for this characteristic term. Okay, so naturally dried. Right, so we have the term natural heat drying at the moment. Right there. And it's up to date with the parent. Okay, so this raises one thing, and Magali, you commented on this before. So FoodOn had this dehydration or drying, and I was just trying to figure that out this morning, how to separate that out. I agree that FoodOn should have a separate term for dehydration, and that leaves the definition a little bit to craft, but what I was reading online is that maybe dehydration the output of dehydration leads to some specified or lower water content. Drying doesn't necessarily get you all that way. And I'm also thinking in terms of cooking processes. You're in the kitchen, somebody's telling you to dry the pasta. So can we craft the drying definition to be just a super class of things like dehydration and all these other dryings? So some of these definitions are coming straight from Langual and they need to be tweaked for a new language. So instead of dried by natural heat, drying. Do I get away with using the word usually? We have to accomplish in looking and defining things like natural heat drying, we have to incorporate the underlying definitions. And I have to double check some of these to see if their parent terms are actually having that parentage in case a mistaken edit happened. So I'm just going to look at that one. Okay, so I think artificial heat drying, these subordinate terms should probably have the word artificial in front of them. Okay, and so this is an existing term, but it looks like it doesn't have a definition yet. Let's just verify that. Oops. We'll get back to where we were in just a sec. Oh, it does. Okay. Oh, I see. Right, these don't have definitions, so that has to be remedied. Okay, just double checking that I didn't make a mistake in copying there. Okay, so back to Ryan. Um,
So the part which you have highlighted in red of food, is it something which you are going to remove it from the label? It's a good idea to keep it consistent with the others.
which item?
So
Is
for the
this one?
drawing, yeah, of food.
Yeah, is that okay, folks? We have an existing term dehydration or drying, but they do seem to be separate processes. I would rather that dehydration be a subclass of drying.
Can we rename it like food drying or something like that instead of having it inside the bracket, just to keep it consistent with the others?
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Do people like that idea? I'm game that. And I guess I had a question for folks. Yeah. Okay. I had a question for folks. We have this preservation by reducing water activity, and that's a thing in food science terminology. So that's a subclass. Food drying would be a subclass of that, as well as at the moment it's a subclass of evaporation process. Now, evaporation process drying seems to be able to be accomplished in a few different ways. Osmosis is another way. So this may actually be not a good parent. Um, Anybody know more about that? Like this evaporation, is it a child of drying, of food drying? Or is it
It could be a mechanism,
yeah,
but
mechanism.
I don't know. Because I was interrupted, I have a crash, and so I didn't heard what you said about the difference about dehydration and drying, but it's still,
I agree with Magali in that evaporation is the underlying mechanism.
yes.
Okay.
But I think that there is a difference between dehydration and drying, perhaps in the sense that drying is perhaps much a planned process, I don't know. And dehydration is perhaps more the phenomenon. I don't know.
I think dehydration, there seems to be a food science attitude that dehydration involves technology more specific. So it's also a mechanism.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. So let's make that change. So food evaporation will be under food drying
By mechanism.
and food evaporation process. We would say now a food drying process involving evaporation of liquid. There was something I was getting a little bit thrown here, which is that it's not always just water that's being evaporated. Alcohol can be evaporated, and maybe other gases.
Any liquid.
Yeah. So I guess we need to be a little bit more generic and not focus on water in the drying definitions.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would keep it generic, but even though it's mostly water, you never know.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's probably a counterexample with something, even though 99% of the time it's probably water.
Okay.
I think you are right. For food evaporation process could involve water or alcohol or other liquid, but I think that food drying is exclusively water extraction.
Drying is
Yes, for
that
drying.
that makes it
I guess
that means that these have to be piers.
Yes,
The evaporation is now a pier. So there is a general term for food's separation of materials. Uh,
yes.
so maybe we can just fit these things under that. So where's that?
I mean yeah, is drying specifically always tied to water? Like I feel like it's in chemistry it's used to just talk about removing some sort of liquid solvent.
Can you think of an application in foods that's not water?
Well, someone mentioned alcohol, maybe like I mean I haven't done a lot of other
But
processing. There might
it's not drying, it's evaporation, I guess. And drying for me in food is always for water, but I
but
don't
is I'm just not
think
sure if that's
about.
just anecdotally or if that's what is used in, say, if we're talking about food chemistry, is that always the case?
I don't know. But
Think about distillation of alcohols, uh, or you're instructed to let the wine marry in the sauce and evaporate. Um, in-
But is that
Yeah, because
really
like
I'm sorry, is this evaporation or boiling in a case of the sauce?
well, both are happening, so we're
Right.
totally prepared to talk about two processes happening at once, or more.
So in Rob's world, God help us all, there is boiling and then evaporation is the underlying mechanism of everything. But I'm sorry, Rand, I cut you off. Please go ahead.
that's okay. Just when looking up like of different like definitions of drying in chemical procedures, it generally says water or another solvent. So while it is most commonly water, they do often use the phrasing another solvent. And I think depending on like the type of food science going on, that other solvents may be used at times.
yes, but it is chemic in chemistry, not in food,
But food is chemistry.
Mhm.
in a sense.
And so, um,
But the solvent, it depends on what solvent you are talking about, because it is not always edible.
Yep.
No, it's the only case I can think of is, as Damien suggested, is when you're broiling off alcohol from a dish. But to my mind, that's
Like
boiling or something.
a reduction usually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm setting
There is
this.
also dry wine, which implies that it's low sugar, but I don't think that's really in the sense of drying. I'm inclined to agree with Magali. I can't really think of examples where the solvent is evaporated, like to arrive at a dried product. Um, it's most always water.
It is almost.
I do agree that there is evaporation of other solvents happening, but usually when we're talking about the drying, it's the, alleviation of water from the thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll see if I can find some examples, but I think like for ontological definitions, we're trying to just, even if it's the most common case, we're trying to encompass all cases, and then we can always put in an editor note or a comment that usually should never be in the definition, right? It should always be in as an aside, as that's usually water.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're making it narrower than it actually is in application. And
Mhm.
food science does involve chemical applications, and we're trying to be useful for also food scientists, right? So
Yeah,
I'll see
in
what examples
theory,
I can
yeah.
find. Yeah.
I think in theory you're right, even if it's very impractical.
Yeah.
I have to admit I'm supporting that, although I don't want to make FoodOn awkward.
But I guess is it that awkward to say that it's the removal of a solvent? For example, water? Like,
The
Right. I
universal.
don't, not in the definition, but it is if it starts showing up in labels a bit. So I'm totally in support of that. And that's especially because I'm starting to run into cases in the recipe model where the inheritance of aspects of processes downward through the hierarchy is showing up in the ability to choose processes or even know what the results of that processing will be. So I totally like that idea. Um, okay, well, what that idea allows us to do is put dehydration of food underneath. And I asked the world, Google, does hydration explain, yeah, exclusively to water or not? And then it went into the whole health thing a little bit, but
Here is this for me. Hydration is related to aqua, to water.
mhm,
Hydrated is water,
True.
right.
but this does not always apply exclusively to water. Okay, but from the etymology, it should, but not in the real world.
No, no, in chemical terms also, like something that's hydrated has an additional water molecule
Yes,
on it.
but they say that it does not apply exclusively to water. So
Hmm.
I'm surprised, but that's it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, I think it's just the water molecule. So even if it's like an alcohol, if it's hydrated, it has an additional water molecule.
Yes, for me, hydration is always linked to water, but
It is.
and yeah, in
So,
that case, and then dehydration would be an example of drying that's restricted to just water.
yes,
Yeah.
um,
but it's not the case here in the Google world.
it isn't, but we can do the sensu thing to create food terms that are specific. So we could be saying water dehydration if we wanted to. Uh, uh, or at least sensu food. And the question is whether we add yet another dehydration that's specifically water. Um, the often the dehydration that's mentioned in the food world involves dropping process, which reduce to what do they call it? It would be some. I wonder if we could phrase it that dehydrated food is even drier than ambient moisture, although ambient moisture varies around the world.
There's like lyophilized, I guess, as well, which
Say
would be
that. Say again.
super dried. Lyophilization is a process of sublimation, like from freezing to like a gaseous water.
Is that freeze dried?
Lyophilization is
Yep,
huh.
freeze dried.
Lyo, lyo. Oh, is that another name for freeze dried?
Yes.
Ah,
Yes, it's the same.
okay. Or freeze drying. Okay, great. Lyophilization, USDA. Is there a Wiktionary entry? I often go to try to support any term with a food Wikipedia or Wiktionary def. So, okay. So, etymology. Is this where the definition is?
Hmm.
Oh,
Weird.
it doesn't actually have a definition. That's unusual. Okay. Okay, great. Let's do this. Hmm. Drawing. Okay, and we have that definition. Uh, uh, whoops. And let's just compare that with this one. So is this a form of dehydration?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay.
All right, y'all. I found a dehydrated wine.
Yes.
So then the alcohol, the other solvent, would also be evaporated.
Right.
That sounds like an incredibly bad idea.
Well, I was looking
This one
desperately trying to find an example. So there you go.
is how beverages are de-alcoholized anyway. Do you know that, Rob? Do you know how they
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, alcohol-free beer, perfect example.
They usually
No,
use some kind of membrane filtration, or it could also be through evaporation.
yeah,
Um,
membrane evaporation, uh,
Super
lowering the
large
beer, or
industrial,
just or just fiddling with the fermentation process.
lower sugar to start out with.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that's a good idea. Still, I mean, if you're not, what's the point if it has no alcohol? Come on.
Well, it depends on where
Cultural
you are
reasons,
in life.
pregnancy, I don't know, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, there's all sorts of
Yeah, there
there's
is a
certain
drink.
compounds that there's certain compounds that are healthy that are in alcohol-free beer, but not in beer. Like it happens.
It's called the fruit juice. Why do you need to make beer? Sorry, I'll start complaining.
Uh, Okay, well, there's a definition to work on here. I'll put it in italics and try to finesse it. I don't mean to have us all, uh, well, I mean, it's helpful to have you guys here. Uh, I'm just going to put in comments the two terms that showed up in Wikipedia.
Oh,
So
clarification. I haven't heard that one. That's cool.
is this is different from osmosis, I guess, because osmosis can happen at one temperature and it's the migration of molecules out of the material.
Yeah, it's done
It's osm
under a
sorry,
vac
S- s-
low pressure, so it's not.
because osmose is linked to the concentration of molecules in the solvent
Hmm.
That's
and
relative pressure, though.
relative to pressure, but linked to the concentration.
Okay.
Forgive me. I'm sorry, I meant relative pressure.
Rest.
Whereas if you,
Atmospheric
s-
pressure.
yeah, if you say reduce pressure here, that's a different thing.
Okay. So can we leave it to the word osmosis to cover that detail so people can go elsewhere to learn about osmosis in terms of this? Or should we
Uh,
mention that here?
I
uh,
mean, we could always add an axiom that relates to osmosis, right? And then people can journey over that way.
Hmm.
Mhm.
yeah,
Um,
no, I'm happy with that particular definition, personally.
should I leave the word of water in here, by the way?
It's a bit redundant, I think, right?
Well, is it? Dehydration can be alcohol now. It can be.
Yeah, I think osmosis is specific to water, but I like dehydration is. But I will double check.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm sure that it is not specific to us to water. You
Oh,
can
you're
do it.
right. No, it's well, okay. Getting
Thank you.
different definitions. Yeah.
No,
Yeah, you're some is just saying fluid and then some like to define it with water.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
I think it won't hurt if we skip this. Uh,
Well, I guess in the context, like if we're saying dehydration is always applying to water, then I think in this case it probably does mean like value having that differentia because if osmosis doesn't always apply to water, but dehydration does. But then again, the dehydration parent also includes the water component. So if we don't want to overload the definition, people can
okay.
find it through looking at the definition of dehydration.
Well, I thought we were, oh yeah. So dehydration will be about water. Okay.
Oh, that was my understanding from the conversation. It was just
Okay.
drying that could be more broadly done,
I
but dehydration was just like
good.
hydration is specifically adding that water.
Good. Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. Now, so freeze drying. So we've got osmotic dehydration and dehydration. At the moment, we have this freeze drying under reduced pressure, but is that wrong? Is that a mistake? I don't see reduced pressure here. I see low temperature.
So I know like in the laboratory, the process of lyophilization is specifically from frozen under a vacuum.
Uh,
So that's like a low pressure
okay.
system. I don't know about the cryopreservation unless those are like truly just synonyms, or sorry, cryodesiccation. So in a desiccator in a chemistry lab, they use a solid material that is anhydrous, which means it's lacking water. And so then the water um, is attracted to that anhydrous material. So that can be done in a freezing environment, but then that would not be under modified pressure. That would still be at atmospheric pressure.
Okay.
yeah. Well,
So,
they're just playing with P. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Damien.
oh, go ahead.
They're playing around with PV and equals nRT, right? So they're trying to lower the pressure, lower the temperature, and just get the water out of like that. But I think it's both at the same time.
Okay. So I'm going to take, since it's not necessarily reduced pressure, I'm just going to use dehydration as the parent. Uh, and freeze drying is a form of that.
Yeah, because there's probably different versions of this. So just keep it simple.
Okay. Okay. And the output isn't necessarily cold or frozen. It's just dried, dehydrated. Okay, so dehydration process which is conducted at low temperature involving freezing food material. And oh, it does say lowering pressure, but we just talked about a case where that wasn't always true.
I think lyophilization is under low pressure. I don't know of a different
Well, yeah,
I
that's
don't
what I'm saying. Like there might be processes like lyophilization, which is a type of freeze drying under low pressure.
Uh-huh. So,
I'm I would put my hand up and say inherently it is low pressure because you're lowering the temperature.
uh-huh.
but it's also done under vacuum, so they have like huge pumps that alter the pressure in
Right.
in the industrial process.
Okay. So I'm saying I wouldn't push the point, but I think it's both at the same time.
Okay.
Hmm.
Right.
Well, but like, are they synonyms though, or was it a subclass? Like, is it sounds like lyophilization is a subclass of freeze drying.
I think they're synonyms. I don't know
You
about
think they're synonyms? Okay.
cryogasification. I've never heard that word, but
Yeah.
I
as
would
far as I can tell, I think that's also a synonym.
I would go for a synonym also.
Yeah.
Yes,
Wikipedia also says it's a synonym. Not that Wikipedia is the be all.
definitely it's a synonym.
Okay.
Great.
So cryodesiccation could be an example, but not a synonym exactly.
Synonym.
Really? Okay. Freezing them and using a vacuum to remove moisture. Okay, I kind of like that definition. Uh, uh, okay, let's just compare. Oops. So let's compare this with by freezing food materials, which turns extract into vapor. Freezing food material and lowering pressure, thereby removing the ice by sublimation. This is simpler language, but it does mention sublimation. But where did I just grab that definition from? Oh, Wikipedia. Okay. So let's see. Oh, it's under the Wikipedia. So it's a recrafting of Wikipedia content. So I won't be accused of plagiarism. Uh, okay, so we could be looking at uh, of freezing it, which is the dropping of temperature, freezing it, and is that okay?
But you should have the definition should be a process
Yeah, I'm allowing the parent term
or a dehydration process.
to be the process. Uh,
Okay.
I didn't spell out a dehydration process, but I think it's okay. Right?
So can it be food dehydration instead of dehydration process?
Um, did we say food dehydration? I guess we did, didn't we?
I don't know.
Sensu food. Okay, so food dehydration.
And you might need to update the parent class of this one as well.
Right. I'll get to editing all of those parents. Okay, I'm comfortable with that. The other thing that you can slip in here with any of these processes, because you're saying they're about food, is you can slide in the food safety semantic, food preservation. Like these are objectives as soon as you mention the word food in the process. Although a number of those aspects should be inherited. Okay, so that's covering this food drying, and it's covering dehydration, dehydrated. I'm not sure what to say in terms of the objective here. I think,
And why not just saying the water content is reduced?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing.
yeah, except that that doesn't differentiate it from the parent term. Um, so,
Mm.
Yeah, unless we do go with that food drying is just the solvent, not a water, whereas
But
dehydration is specific
yes,
to water.
if
If
uh,
if
we,
you mention that drying allow for other things that water, we can say that dehydration. I don't know.
okay.
Perhaps the difference of food
Oh,
drying and food dehydration would be in the kind of solvent or
oh,
water.
yeah, sure. Right, because dehydration isn't necessarily committing to a process, um, but it is a subset. Is it a subset of processes? And there are other kinds of food drying. Like, does dehydration always involve um, some process that it couldn't be one of these other drying things? Or is it a kind of a parallel description? Natural or artificial heat that is covered by dehydration as well as the freezing options.
I am wondering if the dehydration is not the consequence of
Hmm.
drying,
Hmm. Uh, Dehydrated.
the result of drying, the outcome of the drying process. A dehydration
There
is
should be a,
perhaps the outcome of the drying process.
right.
It's a kind of consequence.
Um, well, there's the process. Yeah, right. So we're coming up with this name dehydration as a process, but is it a process or is it just
I think it's a state also.
a
Don't know.
is dehydration a process? Process different from drying. Oh, okay. So we've got um,
Hmm.
well, yeah, they talk about this.
Control method uses low heat and airflow to remove
Which
moisture.
which vocabulary is that coming from?
yeah, I was wondering the source as well.
Facebook.
Sorry.
A great source.
Happy technical library here. What is this? Sabi. Food process engineering. Okay. Yeah.
Don't you have a DOI?
I think it's a whole PDF we have to download to see. Um,
Yeah. Happy to do that and happy to try to figure this out in the next 4 minutes.
we could definitely.
Oh, okay.
With our 4 minutes remaining, I wonder if I could steal the floor
Yeah.
quickly. Damien, we had corresponded about your recipe model and some of the work that we're about to embark on at the PTFI. We're looking to develop a user interface backed by some different AI tools for recipe swaps. So I just kind of wanted to follow up on that like line of inquiry through email. And maybe like reiterate who would be like a best point of contact. I think we're gonna do like a RFP or like a request for expression of interest. But it's definitely something that's more public facing, although it would be awesome if we did leverage some like FoodOn or like recipe models or something like that in the process.
Yeah, so that's a call out to the group. If you know people who are doing recipe modeling, that might want to participate or provide their models, it sounds like. And then I think, Sarah, you mentioned looking for a software developer too. Is that right?
Yes, and so it's a really unique kind of proposal we have because we're working with the UC Davis, APHIS, the AI Institute for Food Systems. So they are kind of building the machine learning models, but we need something that's public facing. So it is a bit of like kind of a developer or engineering challenge about like working with those teams, but also building something that would be public facing.
Okay. So this one fellow just contacted me a couple of months ago, and he runs this northeastcuisine.com. And he created a recipe model of his own, and it was all about swapping ingredients for local sourcing of stuff. So maybe
Cool.
he'll be a good contact. And I'm trying to remember his name. I think it's in Colin. Was it Colin? Let's see. I added him here down here. Anyway, he's one person that immediately comes to mind. Uh, and then, of course, there were some other folks I didn't reference you to. Colin Fontaine.
Oh, okay. Sprouts. Oh, okay. I remember that
Yeah.
person.
Uh, so anyway, he did a neat little app here. I can just pop it in the chat. It's just sort of at the moment kind of demo because it's not backed up by a giant recipe database or anything. But he was interested in applying ontologies to it and seeing how a food on model might work.
Yeah, it would be then backed by like PTFI data. The idea is to have swaps on many different dimensions from affordability to more like ecological dimensions, um, like environmental sustainability, some like allergens and things like that. So, really cool project.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I will interface with Colin.
And then there is uh, what's her name? From University of Twente.
Mhm.
Uh, okay, forgetting her name. Anyway, I'll her one of her PhD students is working on recipes and has some similar goals to what you were mentioning. I mean, so many people have
Is it
done
Michaela or
models. Pardon me?
Michaela or my
Michaela is from Bremen, and she's interested in
oh,
recipes and robotics.
that's right. I remember that now.
Right. So that paper that we were working on the recipe model mentions Michaela's work. Uh, but Roberta from University of Twente is involved in this stuff too, uh, from a different ontology community, the UFO folks.
Awesome. Thank you.
There's so many recipe models out there, so I mean, and then so many resources for allergens and um, so it's sort of, I would say I think that the project that you suggest there sounds like it's as much a data coordination challenge about existing resources as it is a model building
Yeah,
challenge.
very much so.
Okay. Well, it's 10 o'clock, and so let's continue. If you guys want to steer discussion around some of the terms better or more than I have been doing, please volunteer. Otherwise, we'll see a similar tone to this term development next week, in the following weeks. So I invite other people to like sort of step up and chair this kind of talk. Okay.
Cool.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Amy.
See you next week.